Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Keith Bogan.
Hello, sir.
Doug Hammondike.
Good morning.
And Chad Holloway.
Hello.
I actually just realized the other day that for the first time, I believe, or actually the first time in a while, last week, I actually forgot to introduce everybody.
You were out of practice.
Yeah, it was the one. I think it's probably maybe early on, like the first couple of shows, but it's one of the first times that I actually forgot to introduce everybody. So I apologize. Today we're going to be talking about breaking bad news or breaking sensitive news to your children. We'll get into the actual details of it. Chad just kind of threw it up there, and we're going to run with it. Who wants to kick us off here?
I'll go ahead and kick us off. So, it's interesting when we talk about the breaking sensitive news to the children, because a lot of what I do is I just blurt it out, right? I don't have very much of a filter, and it's the situation is what it is, and I'm going to just tell you how things are operating. But sometimes I think that's not the best way. For example, I recently, as you gentlemen know, have made a move to Georgia, and my son now, who's in college, and who in my head, I think he is kind of starting his life, and it won't be that big of a deal to him. I just tell him kind of outright, hey, I'm moving, and it should be a good move, and blah blah blah. But then he, kind of comes back with, well, my mom lives here, and Edwardsville is my home, and so I probably won't see you as much. And so for him, it was a little more sensitive than what I thought it would be. So, I really approached it without much thought. I think in that situation, which wasn't good, even though it's something I felt would be kind of innocuous. But I think there are other times, kind of, for example, when his mother and I went through a divorce, I did approach that with a lot more sensitivity and was like, hey, we both still love you, and this is not your fault. And, sometimes people just don't get along. And I will tell you, even recently, that has came back up. And so he's been asking me why I got divorced from his mom. He's been asking his mom, why we got divorced, and some things like that. So being able to approach that very sensitively is a good way. And I think both of us I've been very honest with him, which I think is the best approach. But it's a little ugly. My honesty is a little ugly, I think. But his mother has been talking to him about, relationships. He's still young. Relationships aren't as clear cut as they can seem to be. And that, even though she and I were together for so many years, the relationship probably should have ended, several years before. And I really have to commend her on her, the way he explained it to me, that she explained it to him. I really would have to commend her on her explanation, and very, very fair, very, very neutral, but very truthful as well. And I think it's a good lesson for him to learn, because he's still at the age where, at 20, it's like, oh yeah, we're in love, and then I think as you get older, or as I've gotten older, I should say, I don't want to speak for everybody, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little more jaded, I think, about some of these things, about the realities of life and love. So, sometimes, and I guess some of it is dependent upon our generation, the way we were raised. And, so I identify now with Gen X a lot. Obviously I'm part of Gen X, and I see this stuff on TikTok and stuff saying Gen X is just basically taking care of themselves. There's no soft edges to it. Gen X is just kind of direct, and they don't care. And I think that's kind of how I am. I'm very direct with what I have to say.
I think that's partly because on a global scale of the things that we've seen in our lifetime, I could the list, what you can rattle off just off the top of my head just like the generations before us, maybe not the generation before us, but because I'm not, I don't think generationally it will go back, because you go back to Pearl Harbor and things like that as well in World War II. And so, yeah, I think it's what you're faced with. But let's be honest, in this day and age now, when all is said and done, this current generation is going to be pretty damn tough, especially with all the shit that's gone on the last year and a half, 2 years. They're going to be pretty battle worn by the time they're old enough to be able to make their own decisions, things like that. So
Yeah, but do you really think that? Because I think to some extent there's a lot of like my feelings. It's probably 5 to 7 years. There's a lot of like you're hurting my feelings, which and like I don't know that I heard that when I was growing up. People didn't care about your feelings, and now I think there's a lot more. There's a lot more both saying how I feel, like you're treating me bad or whatever, and so it just doesn't. I don't know if I agree totally with that, but they have been through some stuff for sure.
well, yeah, well,
It might be an age thing, because I'm very much in Chad's camp on this one. I don't necessarily agree with that either. I think that the sensitivity level of the younger generation now is astronomically higher than what and not that we were any tough thing or anything like that, but we definitely were expected to deal with a lot more without, I hate to use the word coddling or very careful handling, if you will. I think we've been much more the whole concept of helicopter parents and coddling children it's grown enormously in the generation of our children, if you will. If they were sitting right here right now, they'd both probably punch me, but for saying that, because they don't necessarily see that. They didn't live through the era of when Chad and I were kids. And I point to Chad specifically because you two others are youngins, what the heck, you little young things there. Sorry. Jason's like, really? What are you saying?
well, it depends on. Well, it could depend on the way the parents raised them as well. Now,
of course, and that's the nature versus nurture thing. Absolutely, yes, I agree with you.
Okay, we're getting off topic here. Doug, you're unusually quiet at the moment.
No, I was
Don't want
just
to put you
trying
on the
to,
spot, but
yeah, I was just trying to review quickly, like in anticipation that this moment would come. And yeah, I mean, luckily we haven't had many things that have come across that we've had to explain to kids that were such a personal sense. Not to say that we haven't had any kinds of difficulties, but what did actually come to mind, which I mean, recently in the most recent years, is the boys went to a really small school that they loved, which is also the church, which is also where all their friends are. And when we got the news that the school was closing, of course there was like lots of rumors going around, and just well, to back it up to the point is that it was a really difficult thing for us to explain to the boys that, where you've been going for the past, well, for Brendan, it was like for the past 8 years and it's been the same 10 kids in the class. Well, we have to move on and find another school for you. And, just before you're going to go into high school, well, guess what? You're going to lose a lot of your friends and you're going to go to this new school. And there's nothing that we could really do. The other thing was also explaining to them was just the sensitivity of it, because it went through the church. And of course, all the rumors came out. Well, this is why it was done. And that's the reason why it was done. And terrible things were said about, either the priest's handling of it. And then just explaining to the boys, well, you can't believe everything that you hear type things. And also it's bad to spread rumors. And this is why rumors are terrible, because we lost a lot of people in the parish over this as well, just from the stories on top of stories and what you believe, and just like the way it was handled, and not ever really getting the full truth, except the fact that obviously financially they were bleeding money, so the school had to close. but there were so many terrible things, that was said, that, the kids started to pick up and, they start talking to their friends and how it goes. And I mean, and that's on the kid level, not talking about the adult level, it was just like tremendous. And just to show them the aftermath of it all with how many families don't no longer come to the parish over this, it just was crazy.
We had
So
a
glad we never
with
moved.
Frankie. He went to a Catholic school until grade 5. But what happens at that point is we try to figure out how, because we were going to send him to the public high school, but that seems like grade 5 and then goes into grade 6, and 6, 7, and 8 are the middle school, right?
Right.
It seems like a nice way because everybody's coming together from their elementary schools to the middle school. It's kind of a new time it's a clean break, if you will. So we did that, but we kind of couched it a little differently. And luckily a couple of his real close friends went to the same middle school, but and it obviously wasn't as bad because our school was still open and there weren't the rumors you had to deal with and those kinds of things. But, just some of it, I think, is like the positioning of what you're trying to say and like, oh, well, you're going to have much more opportunity now. And you focus on kind of the positive, I think, to the extent that you can. And it just, the positioning maybe at the younger ages can help soften the blow. But I was just thinking about Jason and his girls, and you've got a couple of sensitive things to tell them, like their grandfather passing, and it sounds like they've got some other family members who are in serious condition and with COVID. And
We found out. I'll get to that in a little bit. Worse than initially thought. I haven't told you yet. I'll explain a little more in a little while. But yeah, it's been a tough week, but at least pretty quickly broke it to them. But understandably, I mean, you're dealing with a man who's had a long life. I don't think his passing was a surprise to anyone, really. I mean, even at 7, Sadie understood pretty well. He's 100 years old. So, yeah, but I mean, everybody, it was, I actually was out of the house when Elise broke it to them. But yeah, and I came back, and they were fine. They just rolled with it just like everybody else. And they've been great this week. In fact, I've learned some things about both of them this week that I'm very happy with. We're talking about one thing is they had a younger cousin that they were with a couple of days this week, and we actually went up to visit them. They live, at least his cousin lives in Jersey City, and we had a play date with them, things like that. And after seeing her on Thursday, and then we went back on Friday, the 2.5-year-old actually was jumping in and shouting that Sadie was there, had finally arrived. So I was very happy, very proud of them, both of them, with that. But yeah, there's been the other things that we dealt with too this year, with my mother falling and basically essentially saving herself by tearing up her own arm, and my father's open heart surgery. Yeah, they've dealt with this really, really well. But honestly, things like that, you have to, there isn't a gentle way to do it, especially when it's something as immediately impactful as my mother's falling was, in the way she fell and everything that surrounded it. Yeah, there was no sugarcoating it. I think it was like maybe a week or so, maybe a little more, maybe 2, before they saw Gaga again. And it wasn't, they were prepared. They knew what she, obviously, when you say, well, she separated her shoulder and tore her bicep off the bone. You know what to expect when you walk in the house. Or, Papa's got to have open heart surgery, but I mean, considering the fact he looked pretty good and for him looked okay. And then when they saw him again, he looked like he recovered very well. They're actually walking out the door to go to my in-laws currently, to go to Shiva for the final day. But yeah, it was pretty, it's like I said, it's been a tough year, pretty impactful to handling things. Now as my wife shot me a look, because I haven't gotten into exact detail yet, except to tell her that my aunt who has COVID, my uncle came home yesterday. My aunt is on a ventilator and not conscious. So I will say that I am sure her daughter is handling it much differently than the rest of us are, and has a lot more on her plate of how to deal with it with her kids. But I'll never find out because she doesn't talk to me anyway. Yeah. So, but in my upbringing and my rate and what I came through, if Doug knows, Keith maybe knows parts of it. Doug knows exactly what I'm going to refer to. That when I was in middle school, the town made a major shift in everybody's lives of school age kids when they decided to merge the two high schools into one joint high school. For years, you had that, the crosstown rivalry and everybody. We were one town, but we were two very different, distinct sides of the same town. And the way things were handled by both the parents and the kids in this town, we blew it way out of proportion, just like you would think we would. In fact, I remember, and I remember actually saying this because somebody put up a flyer from one of the plays right before it happened, and some of the names that were on it were the board, the education board that made the decision to pull the trigger, which to an extent, they were right. Some people may still not admit it, but the board was right to do what they did for the town. The town has had its ups and downs. There's been a lot of changes in this town. But for what seemed to be the end of the world, so to speak, in our eyes, in many eyes around town, it worked out fine. So, yeah, when and it wasn't something. It was something, honestly. If we all would have been given the chance to really sat down and listened to what the board had to say, things probably would have been a lot different with the way things were handled here by everybody. So, yeah. And I mean, of course, we've seen national events, like I mentioned, and you think, not in my backyard type thing, if it's in Illinois or it's in Pennsylvania, well, not Pennsylvania, but if it's in Illinois or it's in California or it's in Texas or it's in Florida or it's in Guam, or something happens in England. You know, you get that not in my backyard thought. But with the way things are handled on the news, and I'll bring it up, especially considering we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of it in just a few weeks. There was no sugarcoating September 11th at all. It was everywhere. Everybody was talking. You couldn't sugarcoat that. 3,000 Americans died. You can't just hide that. You can't just put that away, and you're going to get questions. I mean, because like Doug said, even kids are going to talk. They're going to talk, you know, because everybody has aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, 15th cousins twice removed that live in these areas. So, and they're going to talk, you're going to have conversations, and they're going to happen, and they're going to be sensitive, and they're going to hurt. But it's the way you handle it. From the smallest to the biggest. And it definitely, obviously, we know quite well this year about how to try to handle things with the COVID pandemic. Unless you were living under, everybody knows. I mean, everybody's talked about it at least once with somebody, their kids. And they may now have a new perspective of how to deal with these sometimes catastrophic issues.
You know, Jason, to bring up, I think that it's probably was more pertinent for you and Doug, was the space shuttle exploding. I'm assuming you probably were watching that in school and saw that it was supposed to be this happy occasion, and then I was in college at the time, so wasn't watching it on TV, but saw obviously afterwards. And I'm sure that as kids, you guys probably saw that. I'm just like, whoa, like I don't know what you think. But then the other thing that somebody actually had brought up on some social media is, with 9/11, once that started happening after the first plane hit, all of a sudden the principals are like coming over the loudspeaker saying, "Oh, we've had an attack on the World Trade Center," and everybody turns on the news. So then you've got this generation of kids turning on to view this terrorist attack, and then seeing the second plane hit, seeing the towers come down. And if you think about it, those are very different things, because in the first condition with the space shuttle, it's like we're advancing science, it's in progress, and it was an accident that happened. So that's less scary, but still a tragedy, right? But then I think with the Twin Towers, you have somebody like attacking you, and how does that, as a little kid, make you feel somebody's attacking our country, and seeing the people jump out of the windows?
Not entirely true. When the first plane hit, things like this have happened in New York. So around here, because there was you had incomplete information. All we knew was a plane hit the trade centers. A plane hit the Empire State Building back in the
93.
So no, 93 wasn't a plane. 93 was a bomb.
Oh, that's right. I forget what year. Yeah.
Then was it 90? It was the same year. It was actually, that was going on literally as the Waco cult crisis was going on. That was going on like the same week. The Challenger, that was a tough one. And actually, I remember when the Columbia happened, I remember waking up and going, why are they showing footage of, oh shit, here we go again. I was like 20 when the Columbia happened. So yeah, but no, around here with 9/11, it was because we had incomplete information. When the second plane hit, that was when I was actually going into a class, I didn't even know till like an hour later what was going on, because we had a plane hit the Trade Center, so class ran at Rutgers. We just kept going right about on our business. Then the second plane hit, and by the time, you know, that was pretty crazy. Yeah, but of course, you know, I'm sure you probably have very similar reactions with the Kennedy assassination as well. Because I'm
We're not
sure
that old, bitch. right here.
no, you know what I mean, jerk off. Or anything, like I said, Pearl Harbor, I'm sure, you know. But with obviously with 9/11, you had the advances in technology, advances of information getting out as quickly as it did, which kind of bit us in the ass a little bit on 9/11 as well. So,
and I think relating this to the topic of breaking sensitive news to our children, you know, there's two parts to this. I think really kind of as we're talking and it's kind of evolving in my head is one is like we have something to say, like, oh, you're not gonna be able to go to the same school anymore. We need to make some changes. It's something that comes from the parents. And the other side of that coin is that we've got all this, especially now, all the social media. So many things are streamed or shot right at the kids directly. There is no filter on that stuff. I mean, here's the other, for example, is with George Floyd, you know, that's, you know, for a kid to see that stuff, that's traumatic. For an adult to see that stuff, it's traumatic. And, you know, it comes in, there is no breaking it to anybody. There is no sensitivity issues. It's just, it's, if you're flipping through, you're going to
it's
see
there.
it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and what are the implications of that? Because, you know, to our earlier comments about, I think that overall the generations are becoming more sensitive, but at the same time, I think that the information is being delivered less sensitively. So what does that mean something? I don't know, but I mean, it's just an observation.
It actually means a lot because social media just blasts everybody as soon as something happens. So we don't have the chance anymore to break news like Columbine or Sandy Hook or things like that. I mean, it's just thrown at the kids. So they're, in some ways, they're so desensitized to it. They're horrified, but at the same time, it certainly happens much more frequently now, or social media highlights it much more frequently now. So I wonder if it's interesting you bring up the shuttle disaster in 1986 for a couple of reasons. But one is, you know, there was no social media. So the word filtered slowly through where I was, and you could see everyone sort of going blurry as they walked the halls. By the way, footnote, this is how old I am. Jason, I was a substitute teacher in the Old Bridge High School the day of the shuttle disaster. So I don't know what year you were at that point, but I'm pretty sure I was I don't know if I was in high school or middle school that signed that for that day, but I could have been your teacher that day.
No, I was when the 86.
Yeah.
I would have been in first grade, I think. I would have been Sadie's age, 7.
I remember
I
the
would've
kids
almost-
they were not that
almost seven.
small.
Yeah, almost 7. I would have been 7 in February. It happened in January, I'm pretty sure.
So I was either in the elementary school, the 6, 7, 8, whatever you had, or the high school.
Middle school.
Except the kids were bigger than tiny.
I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if 6th grade was in middle school when I started elementary school, but by the time I got to middle school, 6th grade had been moved to the middle school with 6, 7, and 8. I don't remember when that happened. I know my sister, who's 6.5 years older than they, went to 6th grade in elementary school.
Yeah, so back in those days, there was, you know, obviously there was no social media. I mean, for
Right.
Chad and me, when the assassination of Lincoln happened, and people started to hear about it, it was a little, it got out very slowly, Pony Express and all that stuff. Well, what can I say? But so, um, sort of coming back to breaking news to the kids. Listening to you guys, I'm so blessed that the kids were born and raised in this house, that they never had to move, they never had to change schools. So we never had that topic. And interestingly enough, there've been like very recently, last November, their grandfather on their mother's side passed away. They were very, very close to him.
Mhm.
But when in a divorce situation, it wasn't my place to say anything. So they both learned from their mother. And
Right.
it wasn't necessarily a surprise. I mean, he had been ill for a very long time, but it was still very difficult for them. I wasn't around them. I don't even know how it happened. She called them on the phone. We were both away at school. So I don't know how that went down. I do remember very clearly the day that she and I took them and brought them to the living room and sat them down to tell them that we were going to get divorced. There's almost a comical edge to it because she didn't want to say anything, but I thought it was time that they knew because we were in the process of starting the legal stuff, and we sat them down in the living room, and I said, I gave them all the words. Well, guys, that Mom and I, we don't really see eye to eye on a lot of things, and things have been difficult. And we kind of argue a lot, and we've kind of made a decision that it's time to do something about that and kind of go our separate ways. And we're starting some of the official things to do that. I didn't even say the word divorce, and I had gotten to about that point of the conversation, and Justin said, "About
Okay.
time." Just like that, real sarcastically. And then I turned to Jeremy, and Jeremy started to stammer. He wasn't emotional about it. He just sort of like, but, and this went on for a while. It felt like 30 to 45 seconds of, it was trying to get something out. And then after a while, he finally said, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." And the both kids, it didn't, because they both knew it was ridiculous what was going on. So they were both pretty relaxed about it. The thing that sticks out for me, and you guys are aware of it, my father passed in a plane crash many years before they were born, back in 1991. They grew up as little kids knowing that they didn't have grandparents on my side, but I never talked about it. I never said how. And I was really, really worried about them developing a fear of flying, which would be normal for a little kid who lost somebody important to them, even if they never met him, to react that way. It would be normal for an adult to do that. It's a very irrational fear to develop, because it's still one of the safest forms of travel. But I was very worried about how and when to tell them the story of their grandfather. I do recall, I sort of, that look in Justin's eye. There was just a time period when he was about 11, when I'm like, I think he's ready to hear this. And he'd already flown several times. He had flown to Colorado with me to see family. He had flown to Florida to go on Disney stuff and all that. So I sat him down one day, and I told him not the whole story, but just sort of the generalities of it. And I think it was a lot more difficult for me than it was for him. And he was sort of okay, that's an interesting thing. Thanks for telling me, but it didn't seem to really sink in with him. But of course, you might remember it for yourself, and it's like, it's a huge thing. So how do I go about doing this? And is it going to have this impact on him? So I think that was the most difficult time I ever had sharing news with. And it was news that had literally happened 30 years earlier. So it's sort of a whole different bend on this thing. And then I at the end of that conversation, I said to him, "Jeremy's not ready yet. Let's not talk about this in front of Jeremy." And it was about 3 years later. They're about 3 years apart. It was about 3 years later when I felt Jeremy was ready too, and had the same conversation with him. And both of them are cool. Both of them have flown a number of times since. It doesn't faze them at all. So if there was any risk of them developing some kind of fear of that stuff, we were past it. So it's
Right.
cool.
I
Well,
think,
go ahead, Doug.
oh no, I was just gonna say one of the other things that just sitting here listening to everybody else's stories and thinking about other things that have gone on with our family. One of the other things that we haven't touched on is also when you have difficult times and you have to talk to your kids about things that are sensitive, that might even be going on in their own lives, that you know, us as parents could only do so much and explain things a certain way. And then sometimes just knowing the signs that what you have explained to them or how you explained it to them and how they move on, not necessarily always does it fix the situation. And you know, making sure that if you see that the kids are progressing, that maybe you need to get like extra help, you know, with having them either talk to somebody else or, you know, whatever. Because we had like the issue with Brendan and it uncovered a couple different situations that, you know, with, he had just difficulties around the 6th grade with teachers and learning and stuff. And basically it came down to really like an emotional thing, less than like a learning thing. So after you know, we went and talked to some other people about, you know, his situation, all his entire lifestyle improved like dramatically, and there was nothing that me and my wife really, you know, could have done to like, you know, after talking to him and all that, change the situation. But talking to somebody outside of our you know, the family unit just changed his entire life like quickly, and it was just dramatic, and it was like very happy that we did, you know, get him to talk to someone.
Absolutely. I think that helps a lot of the times. Having that, maybe a disinterested third party sometimes helps. You know, I would say that even in my own life, I've had a couple times I talked to somebody outside, and you know, when you can just be brutally honest with somebody and get kind of a non-judgmental feedback, it's nice. And I'm sure it helps the children too.
Yeah, I could see that. Going back to what you were saying, Keith, I think it maybe would have had a little more of an impact on them had they known him.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. It's certainly
Um,
true. Yeah, it would have had a lot more impact on them. And in a very negative way, I would imagine. Sure, yeah, sure. The fact that they never got to meet them, to me, is a great negative, but there are certain sort of positives about it because of the way it happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
And I think this also brings up the idea of who is the information sensitive to. So Keith, I see that explaining this was very sensitive for you.
Mhm.
Explain that to them, but it was less sensitive to the boys because they didn't know who he was, right? So I mean, it just so I mean, and when we're on both sides of that, I think at different times, you know, I know there's times I'll talk about family, and typically it's around like when somebody dies, and like it's hard for me to talk about some of those items with Frankie because I remember very vividly these situations going into the room and witnessing somebody take their last breaths or whatever, and when talking about specific loved ones, it's very difficult for me. For him, you know, I think it's less difficult. I don't think he's seen anybody die yet, but I will say that one time, his great grandmother was sick and my grandma, so I headed up right away to see her in the hospital, and he wanted to go so bad, and she ended up dying. I don't know what happened, but she called me and said, "Oh, don't come. I'm getting better now." And by the time I got there, she was on the verge of death, and she ended up dying that night then. And he was a little upset at me because I didn't take him, even though he was probably only 10 or 12 years old at the time. You know, he wanted to go and was upset because I didn't take him, and he wanted to see her the last time, you know. So
the girls have had their share. We've lost they've seen a lot in their lives already, unfortunately, for various reasons. They've had, great uncles, great aunts, uncles pass. Yeah. But I dealt with it, at a pretty young age as well. I was 19 when my last grandmother died. So it was, and it was in a pretty quick succession of about 11 to about 8 years where I lost all four. Well, no, sorry, 3. I never even knew my mother's mother. She passed away in 1972, 74, 70. No, my sister was born in 72, 73, 74. She passed away. So I never even knew her. The other 3 passed away in pretty quick succession from 11 to 19. So that was like, well, okay. But yeah, the girls have had, my mother's lost several of her brothers and sisters over the last couple of years. My father has lost 1 or 2, 1 for sure, but they didn't know her anyway. They didn't know either of them actually when they passed away. So it really hasn't. Some of them have had an impact, some of them haven't. Some of them I'm not even sure they know the people ever even existed. So but one other thing is the news has always been the obvious thing of if it bleeds, it leads. It's the way it is, the way it's always been. Even your local news, the the mayor has a heart attack and dies. That leads the news. There's a stabbing. That leads the news. The county fair gets shuffled back because of something that happens like that. But yeah, when social media and online media came along, it just, yes, the events obviously of like Columbine and Sandy Hook, there have been obviously significant increases. They've always happened. The first school shooting goes back way beyond what anybody even knows. It actually goes back to one of the Indian schools in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. That's how far back the school shooting start. But yeah, they have increased. But what has increased more obviously is how quickly it can be covered. So honestly, had we not had social media, if when 9/11 happened, because when you can compare, not comparing, but time period of when the Oklahoma City bombing happened compared to 9/11, it's different in scale as well, but you're talking about in 1995 when you had very early, very early internet. That's like we were on dial-up at the time. So and it was basically AOL and like 2 others, Prodigy, like a couple other things. There was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was nothing like that. So how quickly it's covered becomes became a thing probably around 97, 98, that's how, and then it got quicker as time went on. Now it's, you know, as soon as it happens, you're getting news coverage on it.
And
Which-
I really, sorry to interrupt, but I think that really hinders how parents, if parents do want to break something to the children, a lot of times we don't have that opportunity even to do that, because we might see something that's super sensitive and want to talk to them in advance of them hearing it on the news or on the media. We don't have that opportunity.
It's a
And
blessing and a curse.
Yeah, because they just hear it themselves now, and however it's presented, and
Mhm.
it can be negative.
I mean, that's one thing that I'm kind of honestly relieved for, for having satellite radio, and some of the channels that we listen to don't go into it that quickly, because a lot of that is voice tracked and recorded already. So, you know, if you're listening from a show to a show, something that's not live, they're not going to be able to talk about that. So like if I, you know, something happens, you know, another school shooting, if it's recorded yesterday, they're not talking about it and they're not hearing about it. Or like like what happened in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, same thing. I know one of my wife and I, we listen to the country stations, and one of them that we listen to is the Highway. They covered it so quickly because they were live from the festival, and one of their major DJs was involved and was hiding under a bus in while all that was going on. But he wasn't covering it, obviously, but they just cut the feed in and everybody ran like hell. But anybody who was listening to it mostly knew what was going on. So, but yeah, I'm thankful that satellite radio's recorded and things like that, and they have voice tracks, and they're a little slower on getting the news out, so it's not like shoved in our face like that. But yeah, social media is obviously a blessing and a curse. It's also its own worst enemy. We've been, you know, we wouldn't be where we are as a society without social media, which you can take both sides of the argument from that statement in a way. That's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing. Anybody else? Anybody have anything well, he's on the phone. I hope something major isn't going on as we speak. That would be kind of interesting. Any of you guys, either of you two guys, have something you want to pick up and add before we start to wrap this up?
Keep personal information personal and not on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
Have a good Sunday.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say, it's hard and difficult, I think, now, and if I had my life to do over again, but I think that's the beauty of life, is you can look back and see 2020 vision, kind of where you've done things well and where you've not done so well. So I always try to advise my son now, like, well, we talked about this, or I did this and that was wrong, or that was right, and try to help guide him in his life, so he doesn't have to learn the hard way, like I did in many things. But trying to help him to be better, and trying to talk to him about different things, and to the point of this conversation is, breaking sensitive information to them, and how to do that effectively, and how to position that information, because that's important. Especially nowadays, and our kids are going to have a much different life than we did growing up as well, because I think social media is just going to get potentially worse in terms of the the quickness with which information is transferred, whether it's correct or incorrect.
Right. Keith, I'll ask this. Is everything okay?
Yeah, the car repairs, but my life has been so insanely busy, both the last few weeks and coming up in the next two, that I have this one day to get repairs done on the car, and happened to be today. And of course, the guy had all sorts of things he wanted to talk to me about, and didn't happen now. The car wouldn't get repaired, so I had to go on mute for a while. I'm here, no problem.
Is
Just another day in hell, you know.
Is Legendary Warrior on our last legs?
No.
His last
No,
legs now.
this is rear struts and sway bars, which are
Ooh.
in a car. It's actually normal maintenance over time.
Well, sway bars for a little more, yeah, a little bit more than involved.
No, it was only $100 for the sway bar, so I don't consider that an expense.
Anything you want to add before we wrap this up, Keith?
I would just say, picking up on what Chad just said, that 2020 vision is really nice. I sometimes sarcastically say my kids learned exactly what to do in life by making sure they do everything opposite of what I did, which isn't 100% true, and they probably would be annoyed if I said that. But I've had very frank conversations with them. They have very healthy, apparently very healthy relationships of 5 years each with their girlfriends right now. And there have been some very pointed conversations about, yeah, it works because we're doing stuff that you and mom never did. And we're avoiding, we're communicating in ways that you and mom clearly never did. So I guess they learned, how to do things right by seeing how things were done very wrong. But I hope when it comes to things like how do you, in our original topic, breaking news, I kind of went up about how to talk to them about things like their grandfather's passing. It was my own style, but what I wanted them to learn from it was the sensitivity of it, timing and how to say things in the right way. There's no such thing as right or wrong timing for something like that, because it was, 30 years in the past. For something like the passing of a current relative, there's obviously timing issues there, but
Right.
I wanted them to learn how to do it in a sensitive way, and when it was the appropriate moment and things like that. And I think that both of them took those lessons out of that. Hopefully it'll be a long time before they have to pass on any news to people, whether it be their own kids or other people. Hopefully they won't have anything like that for a long time to come, but the seeds of the lessons are planted there, hopefully.
There's speaking of breaking some news, something I want to address real quickly. And this is something that I don't ask very often for it, but I will preface this by saying right now he is asymptomatic and doing okay. But a good friend of mine and her husband, their son, has been diagnosed with COVID-19. He is definitely under, I think he's younger than both my girls, I'm pretty sure. I think maybe he's 5 or 6. Apparently he got it through the school. In Arizona, they've been back in school for a couple of weeks now, for about a week or two now, and he was diagnosed. He has it. Like I said, knock on wood, so far he's asymptomatic. But you talk about, you mentioned about not being so quick to put up things on social media. I'm actually going to post his mother, my friend's comments about the incident in the group in a few minutes, when I actually am going to probably add his father as well. I don't know if he's really in the group. I got to find out. but I had a very short conversation with him last night. He's, like I said, he's doing okay so far. But if you guys could please just keep Matt LaMonica in your the LaMonica family in your thoughts and prayers right now, as they navigate this insanity of what has affected everyone in the world's life in the last year. But yeah, this is a pretty good place to leave this. Probably pick this up again as we navigate. I'll use the word navigate. Navigate our way through the insanity of this current world, which we're finding out more and more information about events that happened earlier this year that just keep becoming more and more mind-boggling as to how deep things really go. Basically, we've pretty much have only seen the tip of the iceberg of what happened earlier this year in certain cases, I believe. And buckle up, because it's going to be a really bumpy ride over the next few months. And unfortunately, I will say that right now, we are equipped to deal with the ramifications of some of these variants on a personal level because of the bullshit that we've been through with this pandemic so far. Unfortunately, what looked like we were progressing may start to see a step back over the next few weeks and months. I hope not, but it looks like that's what we're going to be heading towards. And dealing with that with our children, while they're probably well prepared by now, still is never going to be easy. So, from all of us here at Dad's on Life, so long, everybody.